Welcome to my show, Searching for Integrity. My name really is John Smith, and I'm searching for people with integrity. Why? Because our country suffers from IDD, integrity deficit disorder. We have as our guest today, impressive author, Marta McDowell, and her book, Gardening Can Be Murder, How Poisonous Poppies, Sinister Shovels, and Grim Gardens have inspired mystery writers. Gardening Can Be Murder. You have a lot of information about murder, I think, and looking over your history.
Only fictional, John. Only fictional.
But just think that the number of books you'll sell.
Yes, I don't have any expertise in true crime.
Let me see here. I was looking at. I've got all these pieces and papers and so forth. You've got a lot of background, quite a bit, and they're all good. Ran across the name of your husband, and where is that page? Here it is. Kirk. Very good.
Kirk. It's a family name.
Okay, that's all right with me. And his comment was, "I am, therefore I dig."
That is how he describes my life story in a few words.
Right. And when I looked at that, I thought 30 years ago, it sounds like the Moody Blues. The I Am album. Nevertheless, we're going to get on your albums here. Well, this book, did you have a great time getting through it?
Oh, yes. Yes. So I always loved to read, John. And probably in my 20s, I really got hooked on gardening. And so the books I have been writing for the past, now going on 25 years, have principally put those two things together. So authors who garden or who use gardens and plants as part of their palette, if you will. And so that has been my vocation of various years.
I like it. I like it quite a bit. And I believe you've got a great number of reviews on this released book.
Well, it's very odd, John, but I don't tend to read them because I'm not sure that it would do anything for me other than, I don't know, make me nervous. So I always treat my books as if they are, sort of children that I've raised and they're going off to college, and I've kind of done what I can. And, I want them to make it, and I wish them well, and I do everything I can to help promote them. But mostly I just, I don't worry as much about what other people say, because it's too late, right? By the time the book is printed, what can you do about it?
That's right. Too many people have already been poking at it.
You bet.
Let's talk about the title. Gardening Can Be Murder. Can it?
Yes. So I have published, this is the 6th book I have published with Timber Press.
Right.
They're a wonderful small publisher, under the umbrella of a big publisher, like so many these days. They're out of Portland, Oregon. And this is the first of my titles that they've actually used.
Oh, really?
Really? So
That's the surprise.
they like to pick their own very descriptive titles, which is why, you know, books are called things like Emily Dickinson's Gardening Life, right? That you can't make any mistake about
Right.
what the book is about. This one, you know, so of course it's intentionally tongue-in-cheek, because if you're out, you know, on one of the dog days of August in my garden, it really does seem like murder. But you know, so it's just supposed to be funny and light, and that is what the book is supposed to be, fun. Because as odd as this sounds, for most people like me, reading murder mysteries is fun, even though
Right.
there typically is a dead body involved.
Your next book about plant and horticulture. This is out now. Themes in crime fiction.
That's the
Yeah,
one.
that is the one. And I looked at how you had changed the book into translation: Chinese, Italian, Japanese, and Korean. Now that gives me chill bumps.
But that is not me. You know, the publishing industry is very odd. So there is to me, you know, being on the outside, I'm merely a content provider. There is something that just happened called the Frankfurt Book Fair, right? So if you transit through the Frankfurt airport in Germany, you will see generally some indication that it's bookish in that city, because they have this huge book fair, and that is where publishers from around the world get together and do things like sell translation rights. So it's not something that I've ever had anything to do with, really. You know, my publisher will say, well, we sold your book, you know, for translation rights in Italian, let's say, and you know, I'll get a little bit of money for it. And basically it shows up one day on my desk in a language that I can't read. So I try to always find someone who can read it in that language so that it doesn't go to waste.
No, you have to.
Yes, this complimentary copy. So I have Chinese language speakers in my family. A friend speaks Italian, you know. I've managed to find, a student was Korean, so I've managed to find people who can use them.
Well, this is fantastic. It really is. Oh, I needed to tell you about this. Beatrice Potter's Gardening Life. Won the Gold Award. That's close to my mother's name.
Beatrice? She was Beatrice. Beatrice.
That's right. Beatrice. That's what she is. And I didn't run around knowing a lot of those. I can't even pronounce it, you know. Beatrice. She was somewhere in Tennessee. It's where she was born. She's passed now.
Lovely.
Good woman.
Yeah. We miss our mothers.
Yes, exactly. We have to find a good person that can cross over the other side and carry a message with you.
Yes.
It's so interesting. All this is spread in such directions that you're doing, and you're getting some good information by the people at Johanna's shop, and it says here, I put it in yellow. What is the favorite murder plot from the book?
Well, I suppose that has to be one where they've used the garden, for the grave, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that I think, well, why do people use gardening as as a theme or a little trope, if you will, in crime fiction? People way back, well, like Eudora Welty, wonderful Southern author, she had this very sinister short story called A Curtain of Green. No one actually gets killed in it, but you wonder if they're going to. And, she was a wonderful gardener in Mississippi. And, so of course she uses that because I think writers do write about what they know. That's a well-worn old saw.
Yeah.
And, so I don't plot, I loved there was a book called Deacon King Kong, very strange title, but it had a wonderful plot and just wonderful characters of, different ethnicities and different races all together in New York City. And it's a complicated plot, but funny and interesting and had some good gardening in it too. So I think that was about my favorite.
Well, with these languages flying around, you probably ought to change it to gardenese.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Do you like flowers, John? Do you
I
grow
do.
flowers?
Yes. When I was dating my wife a long time ago, I would send her flowers twice a week for about 6 months. And they didn't, the guys, the people that she worked with labeled me as the flower man.
Oh,
And
that's
it's still stuck with me,
well, I remember my mother always talking about my father bringing her a camellia in his army hat because they met during the Second World War. He was
Mm-hmm.
in the service and
Yeah.
they met in San Francisco. She said, I fell in love with the uniform. And she went around with him to various postings during the war. He was in Texas. And yeah, she said she was very sad when he, left the army and left his uniform behind.
Boy, you got to do it sometime.
He
I
was
was
handsome
on,
in that uniform.
yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, get to know the UPS guy.
No, she stuck with my dad.
uh, um, I'm looking at a cast of characters in a gardening mystery. Deacon King Kong. No, that's
Yes,
James.
love that book, James McBride. Another wonderful cast of characters is a Canadian author named Alan Bradley. When he starts out his series, his protagonist, so his sleuth, is 11 years old and quite the chemistry buff. So there's a lot of chemistry in there. If you have scientists among your listeners, it just depends on what you're interested in. There's sort of a mystery and a detective for everyone. People might like the classics like Miss Marple. She's one of Agatha Christie's.
Yeah.
Or Hercule Poirot, always popular, right? Agatha Christie, you think she wrote starting in the, the 20s, maybe even a little earlier. And she still sells really well, even though she passed in the 1970s. You go to any bookshop, you will see Agatha Christie's on the shelf.
That's also amazing. And I'm sure some of that rubs off on you, I would think.
I hope so. As they say, from your mouth to God's ears.
I looked here as it's a split here between a cozy mystery, and the thriller.
Yes. This was not always true. So detective fiction really started out as a sort of unified entity. But in recent decades, I think you have veered from, there are authors like Harlan Coben and Patricia Cornwall who have, they specialize in these very high suspense sort of novels. Then you have authors like Susan Wittig Albert. She's a Texas writer, has very prolific. She's written on all sorts of things and not just murder mysteries, but she has several different series. I would call them cozier, right? You're not going to be on the edge of your seat. It's more of a puzzle, right? With kind of a pleasant backdrop. Frankly, those are the ones that have more appeal to me. I like a good suspense novel, but I don't like anything with serial killers or stalkers. That is not my cup of tea, as they say. But I like, Ruth Ware, people like that. They're very good at writing those. Very tense, you don't know the ending until the second to last page, and it's often a big shock.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. If you're looking into the future and you've got your hand up here to block the sun, and I'm thinking to myself, when are you going to write your memoir?
You and my husband, he's always asking me that or telling me I should take notes. I'm not really interested in writing about myself. It's great if people are. I prefer to write about other people. Right. So I'm sure that says something about me as opposed to something about them. And same with, people will ask me if I'm interested in writing a mystery myself, for example. Mm-hmm. And I once tried and I had no idea how to do it. Fiction is something quite different than writing nonfiction. Yes. You have to come up with your own characters and plot and dialogue, and I think I like doing the research that's required for the kind of books that I write.
Right, and that's also impressed on me. I usually go overboard with that. Of course, I've written one book, but that's and that was my memoir. I'm looking at the growing popularity of true crime.
Yes.
Is it really?
Yes. So, I think of true crime sort of starting with Truman Capote and In Cold Blood, right? Being
right. Yeah.
Of course it really came prior to that with people being very interested in like the Lindbergh kidnapping, right? That was a huge story at the time. People followed it, back when, sort of everybody read newspapers. That I think true crime was a big seller. But, of late, there are more true crime podcasts, true crime books. I think that's a little too close to truth, right? For me, it's I would rather live in that fictionalized world when I'm reading. Yes. I do read biography and, I read history. So it's not that I don't read nonfiction. I read obviously a lot of garden related books, but when I'm reading fiction, I'm doing it for entertainment. And I would not find true crime entertaining. I would find it troubling, right?
Yes.
I think maybe more people want to face that in a different way, but I would not find that relaxing or entertaining.
Probably not. And you write so well anyway, you might as well just go on, take a few close to the grave. I won't say in the grave, but close to the grave, as we all reach.
Yes, yes. Well, there are people who say that the classic detective fiction, the reason we read it is because it is a way to confront death in a,
Yeah, sure. Hadn't thought about that. What do people, I know they write reviews, and some are good, some are not so good. Very few. Um, what do you think about the population with all those readers out there? Are they rolling along? Or are you making them happy? Are you getting a lot of applause?
Well, it is always my intent, John, to entertain people while informing them. I try to do the same thing when I am teaching a class or giving a lecture. I teach adults, they choose to be there. And so I like it to be entertaining. So with my writing, I try to write until it seems boring, and then I stop writing that and probably cut it out and start writing something else. It's the words you put down on paper, whether they are physical paper or on a computer screen, or your choice. You get to say what stays and what goes. I also have some very kind, friends and relations who are willing to read my drafts and give me their honest opinion,
Right.
which is a pearl without price, as they say.
Gardening the way I do. Here's a note: as escape from the keyboard.
Ah, yes.
I must set a timer so that I can go back inside and work.
Well, it is true. Writing is real work, as you know.
Yes.
And, I do love to garden, and I can spend hours in the garden. I was out in the garden earlier today because tonight we are supposed to have a freeze. And so I was covering things up, to try to rescue them for just a little longer. There's nothing like gardening to be reminded about the cycle of life and death, because, up here in the Northeast,
yes,
we around this time, we will get the so-called hard frost, which means that the flower garden will be over. And
I must say, the plant over your right shoulder in a pot.
Yes. So it's a relative of a poinsettia, right? So if you grow them around the holidays, but this one is very odd because it creates its food, it photosynthesizes primarily through the stems, which are green.
Yeah.
So it is a euphorbia. It's also mildly toxic, right? I wouldn't suggest eating it. So that's why I always feel that it's appropriate to have with me when I am talking about this particular book. Its sap is very potent as well. So if you get sap on your skin, you can get a nice rash from it. And I am fond of it because I grew it on from a cutting from a place I worked years ago. And it's an odd thing, but it would probably grow very nicely in Arizona, depending on how cold it gets.
That's what I'm going to leave it with, is that those are everywhere.
Yes, pencil plant.
That's right. And some of them are not just a pencil, they're all this way, like that one.
Oh yes. So this one I have to prune it once in a while. Show it who's boss, right? And do it with gloves on, because it can bite back.
Well, it's also the same that when people go in to buy your book.
Yes.
Same thing.
That's
be
right.
Ready and in the mood. Well, let me let me find my sheet here again. And where do you go, or where do you sell the most books through?
Well, I always ask that people support their local independent bookshop if they have one, if they're lucky enough to have one anymore. I actually have to drive about 10 miles to get to the closest independent bookstore now, which is a very sad thing because we used to have one right in town. Of course, it is available online, and my guess is that online probably sells more. You can buy it as an ebook if you like to read it on a little device. Always, personally, I still like a book. I still like a book, and I think that it's got a good cover, right?
It does, got a good cover.
And I will say, because a friend of mine did the illustrations, and I think they're quite lovely.
I saw some of those.
All these silhouettes. So she's marvelous to work with. And I don't think that's quite the same on a little reading device. But, I understand. My sister uses one because she doesn't want to buy all of the books and have to have them in the house. So that does happen.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time today to allow us to see a woman of joy. How's that? You certainly are living a great life.
Thank you, John. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, now I need the listeners to say, come on in next time around if you liked it today. And the listeners sometimes do that. It's like searching for integrity. And I've monitored my thank you. And oftentimes I will say this: so long and happy trails to all.
And happy trails to you.
Right. Until we meet again.